So let's start this off. My name is Sean Michael Andrews, and I am here today with James Brown. Now, James Brown has spent the past 20 years perfecting his skills as a world-class magician, pickpocket, and hypnotist. His unique blend of sensory deception, sleight of hand, and con artistry, and we'll talk a bit about that, soon made him one of the most sought-after performers for both close-up and cabaret in the UK. In recognition, the world-famous Magic Circle awarded him the title of Close-Up Magician of the Year, a trophy he's quite proud of, and he should be. His work life is divided between consulting, performing, and corporate training. And I had the, let me tell you a little bit more background. I had one of my friends, Bob, contacted me a couple of years ago, and Bob said, "Hey, let's go learn how to pickpocket." And I never thought about that, but I thought, yeah, that sounds like a really cool idea, because I had heard about James Brown as a hypnotist and magician and pickpocket, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to meet him down in Bournemouth. So Bob and I went to this class, and I met James, and he turned out to be just as great a guy as I thought he was. One of the things that really tickled me, though, was Bob turned out to be really a natural at pickpocketing.
Oh, wasn't he just?
I no longer trust Bob. He's one of my best friends, but
just to chip in here, he messaged me, I don't know, probably about from a good month to 2 months afterwards. He was messaging me once a week, if not twice a week, just kind of saying things like, out of the blue, I'd get a message that just said the words, "Just stole somebody's wallet. Yay." It was like a kid who'd just been introduced to candy for the first time.
Well, the thing that disturbed me was how he seemed to be a natural at it. That was, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe there was something a little bit shady in the background.
Yeah,
but actually, and it's something that we can pick up on when you're ready. But there are some very, very clear crossovers between hypnosis and pickpocketing, and it was one of the things that I think I probably said to you at the time, but I think there are some really good skills that both groups can learn from each other if they recognize that these things exist. But we'll come on to some of my hobby horses at some point, I'm sure.
Well, anyway, I'm really glad you're here today, and of course, as usual, the regular question, the usual question is, how did you come to hypnosis?
How did I come to hypnosis? So it's fair to say that the background that I had was very much magic and entertainment wise. I grew up on a holiday park of all places where we had acts every summer season coming in. I was there was two kids. There was me and a girl called Rachel who lived on the site 24/7 with the families that owned it. And every summer we would obviously have this huge influx of holiday makers, and it was a very prestigious place. And we had, the headline acts of the day came and did their summer season at Sanford, and it was a regular thing. And I saw I was a kid, so I didn't really pay enough attention at the time, but clearly some of that was washing over on me and having an effect. I ended up being a magician, but you have to understand, I didn't do this as a child. I had no knowledge or interest in magic whatsoever until I was about 18, 19 years old. And I've lied about this several times because people ask me that question. And to be honest with you, fiction sometimes is a little bit more exciting than fact. But the truth is that I saw the very first time David Blaine aired in the UK, and I must have been 18, 19 at the time, probably 19. And it came on Channel 4 on television. And I watched this, and for the first time in my life, I watched magic on TV, and I thought, wow, this is incredible. But at the same time as watching it, there was a little thing going off in my head, because bridging the gap for you, I'd been a nurse. I'd worked in, I'd become a nurse, a mental health nurse. I was in my training at the time, but I'd worked since 16. And the psychology had been the thing, particularly the way that people get it wrong from a communication point of view. I don't know what it is, but I've always been fascinated about people's motive behind what they say, and what you can learn out of body language and tonality. I mean, we're not talking about an academic thing. This was literally a child looking and seeing and learning to manipulate people and all sorts. I mean, my parents tell me stories of when I was 5 or 6 on the holiday site. There was an ice cream van. And I would sort of basically, I mean, bearing in mind, I'm one of the kids who lives on the site. My parents are general managers of the darn place. And I'm 5 years old, dragging my clothes, losing my clothes and dragging the remainder of my clothes in the dirt. And then standing, looking forlorn by the ice cream man, knowing that within minutes, some holiday-making family will look at me, take pity, and say things like, "Oh, terrible parents, where must they be, leaving their child to fend for himself?" And they'd buy me an ice cream. I would stand by the hot dog stand. I'd go into the pool, come out, stand, wait until I got cold enough to start to shiver and my teeth to chatter, and I'd stand by the hot dog stand, and the woman behind the counter, knowing full well who I am, within a minute, she'd be like, "Oh, you look cold, James. Have a hot dog." I think that I've always had, from a child, a fascination with communication and manipulation of human beings. Went into mental health and learned a lot more about the neurology of it, if nothing else. And then along that way, I saw David Blaine on telly, and I didn't know how he was doing the magic tricks, but I understood why they were working, and I understood the mechanisms of attention management and focus and misdirection. Picked up a pack of cards, took to it like a duck to water, not from a technical point of view necessarily, but from a performance point of view. I got it. I understood why it was working, so I was able to come up with routines that really piqued people's interest. I started pickpocketing in hypnosis because people kept saying to me at gigs, so this is true, people would say to me at a gig as a close-up magician in this little restaurant, "Oh, I bet you're a good pickpocket," or "Oh, don't look into his eyes, I bet he'll hypnotize you." And I think because I kind of already got the pretense and the whole idea of the character of a playful magician, I just said, yeah, every time. If somebody said, "I bet you're a good pickpocket," I just went, "Yes, I am." Because it occurred to me, there isn't actually the necessity to prove it at that level. Yeah, no challenge has been set up by it. They're making a statement that they already believe to be true, and I'm simply verifying it. There's no need for me now to nick anything off them. And I will leave this, having shown them some good magic, but they will still leave with the firm belief that he's also a good pickpocket and hypnotist. So I suppose in a sense that some of the little things were kicking in. While this was going on, I still had a day job to begin with. I was still learning more about the mind. And I started to learn about hypnosis from a clinical point of view. And I'm not going to jump ahead too far because I think it's maybe to save for another question. Otherwise, I'll talk for the entire hour and you won't get a word in. Harsh but fair. What was I saying? Yeah, so hypnosis came along, and essentially I had 2 initial strings. One was through a guy called Adam Eason, who you may be familiar with.
Yeah, I know Adam. Yeah.
Adam's a great friend of mine, and I think he started off as a very classically trained hypnotherapist, and like very much against any performance angle as well. It was evil. It was the stuff that the charlatans did kind of deal. And I think I mellowed him. Let's be honest with ourselves. I think I mellowed his thinking, and I certainly opened him up to understanding the benefits of inductions and being a bit more theatrical, ultimately, with what you do. not just from a showboating point of view, but therapeutically. I think there are, my argument to him and to his students is always the same thing. You can spend as long as you like doing a lovely long induction with some very careful, poetic words and giving your suggestions, and at the end of it they may or may not even know they're hypnotized. However, if I, right at the very beginning, going down the old route that I would have done at the time, going down the classical route, if I would have done a decent theatrically strong induction with lots of confidence, and then immediately proven hypnosis categorically by making them hallucinate something or forget their name or be stuck to something, then the belief is so rock solid that whatever I say to them, they will accept as true. And after the event, the effect that suggestion has and the efficacy of the whole process is absolutely amplified exponentially by that experience and that belief. It took him a while, but he came around.
Yeah,
I would like to.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. That is, whenever I do hypnotherapy, I always make it a point to test the subject at the end of the session, because when he or she knows that they've been hypnotized, then the efficacy of the therapy is enhanced. If they think they were not hypnotized, then they think to themselves, well, maybe what the guy told me, maybe it just didn't work because I wasn't hypnotized.
Yeah. I mean, as you probably picked up on bits that I've said, my beliefs now about what hypnosis is to what I would have said 5 years ago has changed radically. I can tell you first of all why it changed, or what the effect was.
That's the thing that actually that's our main topic, because I don't know, for those of you who are listening right now, if you have seen that video that I posted a link to, James is doing hypnosis without a formal induction, and it's a very, very nice demonstration. Where were you when you did that?
Germany, in Berlin.
In Berlin. Okay. All right. So anyway,
just for context as well, it's a cold audience. The audience they're not there to watch a hypnosis show. They are there to be entertained, but they're not there. They have no knowledge that there's going to be anything to do with hypnosis. And the guy picked out of the audience is absolutely 100% picked at random as somebody that I just thought was a nice looking guy to have on stage with me in the middle of the audience.
Okay, now I know you spent some time with you, and so when you say the guy just was picked at random, part of me is thinking, no. Okay,
there's a caveat. When I say picked at random, what I mean is, so that's not true. You're correct. He wasn't picked with forethought and preparation. In other words, I got up on the stage, looked out, and he was essentially the person who was the very first person. In fact, I think he was the first person to catch my eye, because he was dead center in front of me. What I wouldn't have done is, this is the thing. 5 years ago, I would have made lots of qualifiers, consciously or subconsciously, whatever you want to say, I think is irrelevant. I would have made lots of qualifiers because I believed in the qualifiers. In other words, I believed that there was a certain type of person or a certain behavior, etc., that would be more prone to, I'd be looking for this easier, suggestible subjects, etc.
Sure.
The point I think I'm making is that the show that you saw that clip from was a small part of a bigger thing that I do. So I've taken that little section out just for that evening, but it's a smaller part of the bigger thing that I do. But very importantly, the bigger thing that I do begins with, I say to the audience, everybody stand up, sit down if you've been hypnotized before. Sit down if you think you could be hypnotized easily. So the people remaining standing are people who either just believe they can't be hypnotized, or who know they can't be hypnotized because they've been to something and it hasn't worked, or they've been told by a hypnotist, which is quite common. Unfortunately. I went, by the way, I know we've only got 7 or 8 people who have tuned in for this, but can I just say to all of you right now, if you are in any way a hypnotist in a show, in any theatrical sense or any public sense, basically, if you hypnotize anybody, never, ever use the words, "Oh, you're one of those people who can't be hypnotized," because that's a suggestion, you muppet. Right? I'm sorry to be so blunt, but every time I hear that, it drives me insane.
Yes.
Partly, and so coming back to what I was saying, the reason I don't have those caveats now is that because of the way I look at hypnosis, I can pick then randomly from that pool of people, just by throwing a ball out or just saying, look, 3 people stand up, I don't really care who, come up here. And I know that I can get 1, 2 to all of those people, certainly up to serious catalepsy, if not into the amnesia. And more often than not, right through to pretty much anything, anything at all that you can do with the more classical sleep process. The reason being is that
a very bold statement you've made.
Yes,
here.
well, it is a bold statement, and it's one that I would be happy to prove and test over and over again, which I've been doing now for the last two years or so. And we've put this reality bending thing out. The key to it is this, and let me just very quickly give you this background because I think it's pertinent. So my background is magic, and just to put it into the context of anybody who's listening who goes, I'm a hypnotist and I've had all these years experience. I've dedicated the past 20 something years to learning everything that there is to know about magic. There's a guy on here, I think Richard John's here somewhere. I'm sure he said he was tuning into this. Richard knows me relatively well. I within the industry, I'm a go-to guy. I've done consultancy for big TV shows because I know a lot about magic, not just the how to do card tricks and the card tricks and stuff, but the psychology behind it, an understanding of misdirection and timing. I've dedicated 20 years to this. One of the things that's taught me is that, let me explain it like this. If I could really do what I profess to do, and what I profess to do is magic, I'm saying to you, this is how magic works via whatever sorcery I'm using, yeah? So if I could actually do what I pretend to do, in other words, if I really was magic, if I wanted to make this card vanish, I could simply will it out of existence. I wouldn't need to click my fingers, say an incantation. I would simply think it and it would no longer be there if I could do it for real. The problem is I can't. So the only way that I can vanish this card is to somehow mask it, to cover it in some way, so that when I move my hands back, it appears to have gone. Yeah, I have to manipulate it in some way. In other words, that there is something that I have to do, a coverage, etc. A ritual, for example. And here's my problem. I started about 2.5, 3 years ago. I started to look at hypnosis and start to see almost every single thing I saw within it as a ritual, but not the reason. It was like a magician's smoke and mirrors. What I found amazing was how many people put so much belief into these things that they were being told. Even when proof to the contrary came along, people kept holding on to certain beliefs which had been factually disproven. For example, the blatancy of a conscious-subconscious divide and the idea of a critical faculty, a gatekeeper between those two minds. 5 years ago, I'd have agreed with you. Unfortunately, about 4 years ago, they proved that's not true. Now, you can choose to ignore the evidence or not, or you can embrace the evidence and say, what does this tell me about this process of what's actually happening, what's going on? Now, I know that people will not necessarily agree with everything that I would say and my belief about it. But what I will say is that I have tested and tested and tested critically, because believe it or not, I don't feel any vested interest in my way of doing it. I couldn't give a stuff. What I'm after is the truth. My way ticks all the boxes. And it's not my way. There's lots of other people thinking along similar levels. I've just, laid it out in a certain fashion. But essentially for me, I think it comes down to, it's all about suggestion, imagination and belief.
Okay, well, James,
I don't see any need for ritual other than to facilitate said belief. I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as the saying goes.
All right. Well, no, this is good. I've often said that many of the things that I believed 10 years ago, believe very firmly, I no longer believe in. There's a lot of the dogma that I just no longer believe. However, I want to dig in a bit to this critical faculty. You said that you no longer believe in a critical faculty, as in Dave Ellman said, the hypnosis is the bypass of the critical faculty and then inserting selective thinking. So what is a good example that would help our viewers? And by the way, we're going to get a heck of a lot more people seeing this in replay than are seeing this live. But what's a good example of say there's no critical faculty?
So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to dig out the actual information and send it to you, because while I recall at the time going through it and etc., my ability to recall that now to you isn't sound. So
no problem. How about this? I want to talk about your video.
If you find the information, of course.
No sweat, no sweat.
Yeah.
I found your video fascinating. But I want to dig down a little bit deeper into that. So you are a very experienced hypnotist, magician, mentalist, and so you're standing in front of that group in Berlin, and you decided on that one fellow. You thought, well, he'll look good on camera. Maybe subconsciously there were some other things that you saw.
He was younger. He had a look and expression on him that said that he was already slightly doe-eyed, looking at me, expectation, etc. So I honed in on that undoubtedly. Okay,
yeah, I'm sure.
It was work.
As a matter of fact, you could not do that because that's what you do.
I mean, don't get me wrong. The hypnosis angle is irrelevant at this stage. This is about who best to interact with. It wouldn't have mattered if I was going to pick his pockets or show him a trick. He was probably high up on my automatic list because he presented himself as somebody who wasn't going to be a tool.
Exactly. Well, yeah, I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, we don't want. I was just reading a book today, and they were talking about some research they did during the 1970s about how important it is that the person is not resistant. As long as they're not resistant, you've got a very good chance of succeeding with them. But anyway, so for those people who have not seen that video yet, and like I say, when I put this replay up here, I'm going to put a link to this really great performance that you did. What happens is James is giving a presentation in Berlin, and he picks somebody out of the audience, and he brings him up, and he gets him to display hypnotic phenomena without the benefit of a trance. It's waking hypnosis, and it's a very cool demonstration. So please tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, so first and foremost, my premise, and this is along the lines of, so at the same time that I've been playing and thinking about this, I know that Anthony Jacquin and head hacking were touching on some of this. I know one of my best friends in this industry is Martin S. Taylor. He's the chap who taught Darren. I don't
know him.
Yeah, he's brilliant, and he's a real knowledge on the subject, but he's one of those people that a lot don't know. But he does an amazing show, which is, he calls it Hypnosis or Hypnotism Without Hypnosis. So essentially, he gives a lecture about what hypnosis is and what it isn't, and then he proceeds to do demonstrations. But it's very clever the way he puts it together. Hypnosis Act, the 1952 Stage Hypnosis Act here in the UK is meaningless to anybody at all, period. It holds no water whatsoever. It's never been tried in court. It's not been ordained, as it were, as a proper law. It's an act. It's nonsense. Essentially, it's talking about stage hypnosis, and it's saying there are a few caveats to it. And one of them is that you shouldn't hypnotize somebody who's under the, or you're not allowed to hypnotize somebody under the age of 18. Let's be honest with ourselves. There are, in this day and age, I think, there are common sense issues. I talk about safety and law on the reality bending course that we have, and the safety video is about 30 seconds of me sitting looking into a camera and saying, "Don't be a twat." In a nutshell, you know, realistically, why should I give you rules and regulations? Half the point of what I'm trying to teach people is I think we need to get out of rules and regulations, because we've created some utter nonsense over the decades of hypnosis. I mean, whether you can argue benefits of is entirely subjective, I would argue, because I personally don't see anything overridingly beneficial with it. But sleep is a suggestion. There is nothing at all that I've ever seen done with a trance induction, a sleep state, that I can't do with somebody's eyes wide open and feeling and acting normal, with no pupil dilation, no, literally having the ability to stand there and go, yes, my name's James, I feel absolutely fine. I'm having a chat with my mate Barry in the audience. I'm saying hello to the wife and kids. And yes, I can still see a leopard over there and it's freaking me out. But there is nothing about me that feels any different. Now, don't get me wrong. Theatrically, there is still a massively powerful moment in standing somebody on stage and going, "Do you feel hypnotized? No. Do you think I could hypnotize you in public? No. Sleep." And then,
right.
You know what I mean? It has a theatrical value, right. But I can't see anything about it other than it's a suggestion. At which point, I kind of look at it differently, and I start thinking to myself, what do we need? What don't we need? What is getting in our way? And personally, I've just read what you said, what Dr. Jim Wanders said about Milton Erickson was a master of this techniques in therapy. Yeah, absolutely. I think he was. But I think that at each level and at each generation, we all suffer from the same handicap. And that is, we have an inbuilt tendency to legalize everything that we do, to create rules and regulations and formulas. So you look at hypnosis, it is entirely formula driven for most people. You go on a training course. If you go out into a street, into a town, I can guarantee you that the vast majority of street hypnotists are doing magnetic fingers, followed by magnetic palms, followed by a handshake induction. Sure. And then possibly even the suggestions themselves, I could pretty much tick in a box what they're going to do. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, until the people believe, and this is my point, is believing that these things are in and of themselves important. Yeah. I mean, I've seen, I won't say who, but I saw somebody teaching, they were doing a special on the handshake induction, and you could come along for a 3-hour seminar to learn every single nuance of the handshake induction. And I'm like, that's absolutely fantastic. Unfortunately, I know that it makes no difference at all whether I start the handshake induction with some pattern interrupted handshake here, or whether I start by asking them just to look at their hands and starting at this point, or none of the above. Yeah. So the actual act of shaking somebody's hand and having this arguable moment of confusion or pattern interruption or whatever, yes, you can do something with that. But you know what? That works. If you said to somebody, like there's that wonderful phrase, what is it you're not thinking about right now? Which makes your mind go blank for a brief second. But actually, if you just said to somebody, right now, imagine your mind goes blank, and they will go, and they'll do exactly that. Just ask them, imagine your mind goes blank. And in the moment that they go like that, use it as a pattern interruption, give your next suggestion. And you know full well that if their belief is in place, they will follow your suggestion, and their own imagination will create it. Talking about the sleep thing very quickly, my proof to this, change the word. So here's the thing. If I say to you right now, forget hypnosis. If I say, pretend to be asleep properly, right now, go for it, Sean. Pretend to be asleep. You sleep with your eyes open.
Okay, sorry. I was visualizing. All right. I'm pretending.
Yeah, no. As in, literally, pretend you're an actor right now. You are an actor on a stage, and you want the audience to believe that you are asleep currently. Yeah. Okay. Now, so take your hand, your chin, your fist away from your chin. And what would naturally happen? Yeah, your head would come down and your shoulders would relax, etc., etc. So you can open your eyes again. Right, so here we go. Forget hypnosis. If I said, spend the next 20 minutes approximately imagining that you were asleep all the time, just sit there and physically and mentally continuously suggest that you're asleep. In 20 minutes time, when I ask you to open your eyes, you will be groggy, disorientated, possibly thirsty. You might have a bit of a headache. There's all sorts of potential reactions, abreactions, etc., that come along within all of this. So what I'm saying is, if you alter that element of hypnosis, so if you say to somebody, you can experience all the hypnosis stuff, but without any of those side effects, if you like, of an imagined sleep moment. So simply change the word. If you want a trigger word, use a different word. And it doesn't have to be relaxation. You know full well, you don't have to be relaxed to be suggestible and for that to happen. Yes, it can benefit. It's not going to adversely affect, but it's not the reason for. Yeah, if relaxation was so valid and so necessary within hypnosis, then by definition you couldn't hypnotize somebody who wasn't relaxed, and we know that's just not true. So hypnosis is no longer the active ingredient. It's a helpful part of it potentially for some, but we can remove relaxation as being that has to be in play.
Okay,
does that make sense?
I'm with you. Although I'm sure you will agree that there is the benefit of the trance. There's the benefit of the word I'm looking for is doggone it. The ritual. There is the benefit of the ritual because the person feels that something special has happened in addition to them getting the suggestion. But what I saw you doing, you were doing what to my mind was waking hypnosis. You took that fellow up there and then you, without benefit of a formalized trance, you seemed to take him from on an Aaron scale, you took him from, Aaron's 1, Aaron's 2. You're familiar with Aaron's scale, right? Yeah, I know you are. Yeah. And you took him through various steps and then eventually did some really significant hypnotic phenomena from this fellow without the benefit of trance. I mean, that's what I saw in the video.
Yeah, and within the show that I do, when it has the slightly larger theatrical context, that also includes full-on hallucination, positive stuff, negative stuff. Just pretty much there isn't anything. As I've said, I've pretty much tackled everything at one point or another. So there's a question here. Michael's put: if anyone said this to anyone else, would it also happen? And thus, we are all hypnotists. Here's the thing. The answer is yes, essentially. I would arguably say that we are all hypnotists, because I think the whole point of this is that from the day we were born, things have been suggested to us, not just verbally, by lots of means, environmentally, physically, gesture, tonality, all of it. Has communicated a level of suggestion, and I would include in that suggestion peer pressure, social pressures, etc., authority stuff. It's all suggestion. We've also had an imagination, which is the way that we interact with our past and our future and our present. And a lot of the time, our imagination is incredibly powerful, and it does a huge wealth of things. And we are now, through neurosciences, learning more and more and more about the function of that imagination. And one of the interesting things is that the part of your brain that works as your imagination can't distinguish between what it's imagining to be and what is. That's not its function. It doesn't do that. You also have this notion of belief, which just by looking at newspapers, we know that belief is a pretty damn strong thing that can utterly override logic, rational thought, anything, in fact. Yeah, we know that. We don't have to be hypnotists to understand how powerful belief is. But we also know through our daily lives. Do you know what? I find it fascinating. I meet lots of people who have arachnophobia. And most of them, if you were to ask them to, which is a bit of a suggestion anyway, but most of them, if you ask them to do, would be able to conjure up a very vivid memory and story about the terrible thing that happened to them as a child with a spider. The problem is that the stories are all the same, generally speaking. It's the same story for everybody. Now, at which point alarm bells should be ringing anyway. But what I do see on a practical level, being a parent myself, and now, with going through it a second time with Charlie, because we've got a 19-year-old and a 5-year-old. So I did it once with Ben and his peer group and their parents, and now I'm doing it again with Charlie. And I am seeing over and over and over again, mothers and fathers with their babies and toddlers, teaching them how to think and behave and act around spiders. They are programming their children with suggestions. And this is the key. It then becomes automated. The human brain has a phenomenal function of automation. We, not just by repetition, it's partly repetition, but there are other factors to it. We are able to automate function, and the conscious subconscious divide thing. Oh, by the way, there's an interesting thing. Somebody showed me this a few months ago, and I'm trying to remember where it was now. It was an article that was tracing back the idea of conscious and subconscious historically, of when have we used and how far back can we trace it. And what's interesting is that it looks that it's not as old as we'd think, but it's also very clearly defined as a metaphor to begin with. The earliest record is metaphorical. In other words, somebody's gone, actually, it rather appears like we've got kind of a conscious brain and a subconscious brain. And as a metaphor, it's brilliant, and it still works. And I wouldn't argue the metaphor. I would argue the biological fact. That would be the difference. Yeah, I agree. But metaphorically, it appears to me that you have this sense of, there are some things that I do, when I would call those head thoughts, that I have to be actively involved in. Like when I was learning to drive a car, I had to think about everything I did. I had to be there. When
you were learning.
Saying it, doing it when I was learning. And then there comes a point where the thing that I'm doing can become automated. And it's not just actions of doing that become automated. Of course, it's other things. It's responses and feelings. Now, if you're a married man, that there is a face your wife can pull, or a tone that she can use, which will instantly make you, because you've created this link and this experience between. The problem is that you will respond automatically like this when you hear the tone, whether your wife intends it to mean that or not. Why? Because you have programmed this automated thing has happened. It's taken over. Now, my argument with all hypnosis is that I love, and I would agree with the head hacking simplicity idea of this. And I think there are doings and happenings. And I think that from a theatrical point of view, I want to take something that I'm going to get you to do, but I'm going to help you perceive that it's happening to you. In other words, it becomes an automated thing. And now you have this weird phenomena of looking at yourself doing it and thinking how. For example, if I stuck my hand to my head, pretending, the way I would do that is I would push and not actually pull, and that any action was always counterbalanced by the other thing doing the opposite. Right. Yeah. So when I pull my hand away, my head has to go with it, and vice versa. Okay. Yeah. And we can create this incredibly believable struggle that, my hand's actually stuck. Yeah. But I know I'm doing it. Now, if I was hypnotized and doing that, physiologically, nothing changes. Period. Nothing changes physiologically. Right. The only thing that changes is my perception of it, because I'm now seeing it as happening to me. Now, I think that this experience is identical to the experience of somebody who is behaviorally doing something that they feel is happening to them. And most therapy is about taking something that somebody believes is happening to them and moving the control back to them doing it, which means that they can stop doing it or change it or alter it in some way. The problem is this journey from something that I'm doing to something I perceive is happening to me, theatre, and something I perceive is happening to me to something that I'm actually doing. And more often than not, in my experience, from that kind of therapeutic point of view, it's getting somebody back in touch with the idea that you're doing this. Nothing's pulling your strings here. You're not leaping out of, you're not you're not fantasizing about this terrible experience at work because somebody isn't making you do it. In other words, you are actively going through the process of thinking these things and doing these behaviors. The problem is that you believe, and your perception is that it's happening to you, which now creates this horrendous problem that because you believe that, when somebody says stop doing it, the actual effect of somebody saying to you stop doing it is to make it worse. Yeah. So, it's a bit like just to ride this hobby horse of somebody who worked in the NHS and saw this happen, the National Health Service, and saw this happen therapy session after therapy session. I wish therapists would stop making patients go over the problem. Yeah. Do it once if they've never done it before. If it's cathartic for them to finally unburden their chest, do it. Great. Never ask them to do it again, you callous bastard. Yeah. If you want to make sure you remember, record it, write it down. Don't ask them to do it again. I mean, what on earth is wrong with you? And if you're going to go back again, go back with strategy, with change, with things and tools, and But I used to watch people come out of, because I worked on reception in one particular place for about 6 months until I got fed up with it when I was about 17. And I used to see people come out of the therapy room week after week in tears. Yeah. And then they go back and they do it again. And you'd be thinking, yes, we all know that there is an illusion that if you cry, you feel better because you stop crying. Right. But it's not the same thing.
Was it just some wrong-headed tactic to desensitize, or were they just being stupid?
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of the problems with most areas of life is academia takes time to catch up. Yeah. So a lot of this therapeutic stuff came from a belief in the sort of Freudian thinking, the idea of let's dig deep, let's dig into that memory and let's find the causality and the reason behind it and what's really making this tip, because if we do that, then it'll help. And the problem is that I think we've now got to a point we've realized that wasn't true. It was a nice idea, and maybe there are some cathartic benefits at times, and it's good to dig in at the right moment. But overall, therapeutically, it's a terrible tactic. But it takes time. So if you go and learn about psychology today, you will still be learning through a textbook that was probably written 20, 30 years ago, which is fine. But some of that stuff has changed. Yes. Yeah. Our knowledge has altered at some level, and I think we need to be careful. But then this is my whole point with hypnosis. I think that Einstein's thing, doing the same thing the same way and expecting a different outcome. I find it fascinating that hypnotists have come up with this 1 in 5 people can't be hypnotized, and you're going, oh really? Because I'm sorry, unless you've got something really empirical to back that up, that sounds to me like an excuse, because on average, 1 in 5 people that you try and hypnotize, you fail miserably to do anything with.
One of the most highly hypnotizable people I've ever met in my life thought she was told that she was not hypnotizable. So it's
and I just think that there is that sense where that but think about, and this is my point. If you're a stage hypnotist and you've learned this method of doing it, so I'm not suggesting this individual I'm creating here isn't very well versed and very knowledgeable and very experienced as well in doing this thing, and they've got their induction down and they've got their stage show. When they get their people up and it works exactly as amazingly every night that they expect, and that person doesn't respond, and they say to that person, 1 in 5 people can't be hypnotized, don't worry, that's fine, off you go. Yeah. Or words to that effect, or even just within an attitude. Because again, let's not forget, we convey a damn sight more without words than we do with them. Yeah. Just on a slightly side note before I forget it, I saw a stage hypnotist fail to wake somebody up, and he couldn't understand that he was adding to the fear and the panic in the audience by his everything. Yeah, and I'm like, oh, for goodness sake, she's just under, she's not locked in a world. She's not asleep, for goodness sake. Let's be clear about one thing. Yeah, you don't have to wake this woman up. She's not sleeping, and if she was actually sleeping, leave her to sleep. She'll wake up when she's ready. Yeah. But because there is still, and this is the point I'm making, because we still have these perpetuated myths and beliefs that we still hold on to this stuff. I worry slightly that the progress isn't there, that people need to be a little bit more relaxed and free thinking. I think it's a good thing that finally, after decades, hypnotherapists and stage hypnotists are actually starting to listen to each other, because I've said from the beginning, as soon as I came into this world and I saw this weird divide between the two groups, I'm thinking, well, there's actually some really good stuff these guys over here are doing that you guys could benefit from, and the other way around.
Most definitely there are, but I want to emphasize something that you just said, and that was I think it's definitely a what's the opposite of a best practice? A worst practice of any hypnotist to tell any person that they are not hypnotizable, or absolutely bad, because it robs that person of something. But I also want to go back to your video a bit, because you got some amazing phenomena from that young man. So what, in your opinion, I believe you got amnesia. The fellow was, in my book, the fellow was a somnambulist. The fellow was a highly hypnotizable type in my world. So using the method that you used with him, I'm sorry, I want to back up one more. Would you disagree if I characterize what I saw with you in that video? Would you disagree if I called that waking hypnosis?
No.
Okay. All right. So,
no, not at all. Not at all.
So he was a high responder. In your experience, what percentage of people can you get that kind of high response from using those techniques?
Okay. Very high. One of the things that I particularly, in my research of a different, because don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about changing techniques necessarily. So in the act that you saw, that's the bit that I do. And most of my shows tend to be entirely, I very rarely use sleep as a suggestion. And if I do, it's incredibly contextual that I've added it in. But I've not thrown the baby out with the bathwater, so I will still do all of these things. And I think it's not so much that I'm saying I've got a better way. What I'm saying is there is a way of thinking about it, that I have a different way of approaching it and thinking it. And one of the things that I've done is I've removed challenge aspect from it. So in testing this, which it sounds terribly unprofessional, honestly, what I was about to say, I did very discreetly and very professionally. I used to go to a lot of hypnosis shows, and I wasn't really there to watch the hypnosis show. I kind of was, but not really. What I was after was the people who were kicked off the stage. Yeah? And I would earmark just as many as I could basically remember where they were sat and get a mental image of who they were. And I would search them out in the interval. And I would have a 20-minute interval, which is less time than the guide already had on the stage in the first half to try and hypnotize them. Yeah. Oh,
let me stop you for just a second, because in the UK, often they'll do a hypnosis show in 2 parts, and they'll have an intermission, which never happens in the United States. We always do a complete show, but that seems to be traditional in the UK.
Yeah, it is a bit more traditional, but it's also beneficial from a stage hypnosis point of view, because you get to have a lot of fun in the interval with your subjects during the interval, interacting with the audience in and around the room and in the bar, and there's a lot of fun to be had from that, from a theatrical point of view. But no, I would grab these people in the bar, and I would get serious phenomena out of them in a short space of time. Not because I had a better method, but because I had a different way of thinking about the method. And what that moment told me straight away was that collection of beliefs that you're creating doesn't work for this person. But that doesn't mean that this person isn't suggestible, because of course he's suggestible. Everybody is. I've never met anybody that isn't suggestible, because I haven't just done hypnosis. I am a pickpocket and a magician. I know how flipping suggestible people are on many levels. So what I would do is I would change it. And, equally, if I met somebody socially in a pub and somebody were to say to me, I can't be hypnotized, I'd go, all right, what makes you say that? And I would always say it in that kind of tone. I'm not challenging anything. Right. I'm just like, all right, that's funny. Why? And if they said to me, I went to a stage hypnotist, and I would say, all right, let me guess. And I would always cut them off. And okay, let me guess. You sat there and there was some lights and he told you to stare at something and you glued your hands together, and they'd be like, yeah. And I'd be there. Clearly that wouldn't work for you. Come here, let's do something else. And I would simply do something else. And the something else almost always worked anyway. Not because there's something else, and obviously it works the other way around. If I met somebody who goes, oh, no, hypnosis doesn't work on me, how do you know? Well, I went to a hypnotherapist, let me guess. You sat down on a comfy chair in a nice little, softly lit room, and the person talked gently to you and got you to relax and focus on your breathing, and they'd be like, yeah, and we'd be, yeah, it doesn't work like that. Look in my eyes, sleep, But what I found was, and it was weirdly summed up perfectly, and it's the thing that that sort of is, oddly enough, this is very much at the heart of everything I do as a magician, a pickpocket, and a hypnotist. It was something my grandma said to me. She died quite a while ago. She was 96 when she died, and she was probably about 95, 94 when she said this to me. This is proper like bedridden deathbed moment, pearls of wisdom. She knew nothing. I mean, she knew what I did for a living, but that wasn't her life. She's an elderly Yorkshire woman, and I told her all about my job and the bits and pieces, and she'd never really said anything. And then one day she just said, "I've been thinking. Your job isn't to fool people, is it? It's to give people the ingredients to fool themselves." And I thought, that's it. That's absolutely perfect. And you know what? I think it is. So my point where hypnosis is concerned, and that is, I want to give you, via suggestion, on every level, not just what I say, but everything I'm doing, my attitude, my confidence, just everything about me. I want to create the suggestion, the right ingredients that your imagination will accept to bend your reality for you. Yeah. So I'm not looking at, and that means that I don't have to do any formalized inductions. That's not to say I won't do them, because if I meet you in our first meeting and you go, you're that hypnotist, aren't you? With your eyes open, with full of expectation. Yeah. And I go, yeah, I am. And he goes, I love hypnosis. Now I know straight away this guy absolutely loves stage hypnosis, because there is no other reason for him to frame it like that. I know that he was already set with a stack load of information and beliefs. So all I need to do is give him permission. And the truth is, I know at this stage that permission could be that I say, thank you for the one, push down on my hands, close your eyes, sleep. It could be that I reach out and take his hand. It could be that I ask him to stare at a light bulb. Or it could be that I roll up a piece of paper and I throw it at his forehead. Or it could simply be that I say, go on then. And he does. You see the point I'm making? Because I think it's about the information. It's about the ingredients that I give you. So if I meet you and you're clearly not that guy, you're the guy who doesn't believe in this, doesn't like it, it's going to be difficult. It's going to challenge everything, because I see it that I've got to win and I've got to remain in control. That simply tells me that I've got to package this differently. I've got to give you a totally different set of ingredients. And if within those ingredients, I take away all of your fears, like I say, you don't have to close your eyes, you don't have to get asleep, I know that I can still give you suggestions, and as long as I've created that environment for you, and I've painted the picture for your mind the right way, that your mind has the capacity to create that imagined thing and automate it for you completely, so that you can hallucinate a dog. And I've met people that you can't get to hallucinate a dog, and the reason being is that for whatever reason their mind simply doesn't do that. It does other things. Oh yes, it does lots of really cool other things. So I don't care. Yeah, but it's never. And because I've removed all of this whole challenge aspect, and it just
Right.
a freebie for you quickly. One of the first things I say to any group of people when we start talking about hypnosis, and it's in the show as well, is I just very casually make the comment of some people find it difficult without practice. Now, if I have somebody on stage with me, I emphasize some. In other words, I suggest that they're not included in the sum. Yeah, some people find this difficult without practice. Just a little bit of tonality, just an extra quiet message in the sentence. Otherwise, if it's like a social event, I'll tell everybody, look, some people find this difficult without practice. What this does is very simple. And then it means that at any point of test, at any point where I say the word try and find you can't, or whatever I say, at any point that we have that definitive moment, yeah, if it doesn't happen, it's because they need more practice. And at no level at all does it reflect on me. None.
Right.
None at all. Because I'm not setting it up as I'm going to hypnotize you. I'm setting it up as I'm going to give you some ingredients. And if you practice enough, you're going to be able to do this, because everybody can. Because it's not this mystical thing tied up in ritual. It can be if you want it to be, but that's not what makes it work. Because you know how deeply hypnotizable, in other words, you know, because you've met people who are living entire lives in a trance-like state with a particular behavior that they have. Yeah, it's just the same way that I can believe I can't take my hand off the wall and it's stuck. You meet people who believe that they can't let go of things in their life or do things or accept or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
And these things
Great metaphor. Yeah.
These things are absolutely real for them. You know, you make that guy who says to you, oh, I could never stand up and talk in front of a crowd of people. And you're like, really? Why? You're saying it as if like you've got no legs and somebody's zipped your mouth shut with glue. You're saying it as if you've got a disability. But actually there is nothing about you that can't do that job. You've already got every single thing you need. The only thing that's in the way at the moment is a perception that you have about you and that thing. Yeah, it's a trance behavior. Nobody shook his hand to put him there. Nobody induced that with a high five. Yeah? Because this is my point. Hypnosis, because we see hypnosis in so many other ways. Within when I say within religion, I'm not saying about religion as a deity, but I am saying about some elements of the way that it goes on. You can clearly see that hypnosis happens when very few, if any, of these boxes of what you have to do to hypnotize somebody are ticked. Yeah. So that says to me, it's not happening for these reasons. If it can happen in a myriad of other fashions, then maybe these aren't the things that are at the core of it. That's not to say that we shouldn't get the theatrical value from doing them, because we'd be idiots not to. But I just don't like the idea of, you know, I still meet hypnotists who are so financially and time invested in a particular methodology of hypnosis that they actually believe that
hypnotherapists or stage hypnotists.
Stage hypnotists. I've met stage hypnotists who have this incredibly arrogant sense of my hypnosis is the right one and it's better than anybody else's. And you're kind of like, yeah, you know, it's fine, but I think you're missing the point slightly, to be honest. You know, because if everybody else's hypnosis works, and by the way it does, then it can't be for the reasons that you're all saying entirely. You understand my thinking on this?
Yeah, I do.
I'm happy to whack somebody under with an induction, but I also know that there are downsides to trance. Because I personally believe that there is no such thing as trance other than what is imagined. You can imagine, you can imagine yourself in a trance and you would behave and act a certain way. And it does depend quite considerably on what somebody's frame of reference is for trance. Because it's very interesting when you try to put somebody in a trance who doesn't have cultural awareness of it at all, that their behavior around it isn't quite the same as somebody who comes from a culture that has a very clear visual understanding of what trance is. It's quite interesting.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, many, I started to say everybody's idea of trance is going to be different. But there is a certain expectation in our culture of what trance is going to look like, what it's going to feel like, and which can be useful.
Yeah, and as my point made earlier, it can also be detrimental, which is why I think you always have people, and maybe it is 1 in 5. Yeah, maybe there is a sort of a 20% of people for whom that frame is automatically so off-putting that they wouldn't enter into it at all. The concept of trance, etc. I don't know how prevalent it is over in Germany, and I certainly don't know what it's like over in the States, but I can imagine. Religion is also an interesting one. Is people's take on what hypnosis is. I mean, the amount of people that have said to me, this is the work of the devil, and I'm going, yeah, but honestly, earlier on I heard your mum suggest something to you and you were fine with that. Exactly what do you think is going on here?
Yeah, there's not too much of that here in Germany. There is in the United States, in the Bible Belt in particular. There's some, but usually they don't show up they don't come to your show, and they don't show up in your hypnotherapy office. A question for you, James. Do you believe in somnambulists?
Yeah, what I believe is that there are certain people, whether you say naturally, I'm not sure about naturally, but there are certain people that when you meet them, the collection of information in their mind puts them, I think, into the perfect bracket of, and that can be ongoingly trained. So, for example, there's a guy I know, Paul Brooks, who owns a magic bar here in the UK, in a place called Bath. If you're ever in Bath, go to Slight's Magic Bar. There you go, a little plug for my friend. He is what people would call a somnambulist. But I've also, because I'm slightly devious like that, I've also taken a great deal of pleasure in sort of programming certain beliefs in, or at least solidifying beliefs in. Yeah. So he absolutely believes in me as the hypnotist in a very classical sense. That's how we met. So that's the way I've continued it going to some degree. And there's a famous magician called Gregory Wilson that came over to the UK for a big conference and do a big lecture and a show. And he sat near the front, and he doesn't know I'm there. I just sneak in behind him, and just the tone of my voice and just the sense that it's me is enough. So, and I just leant in and went, sleep. He did. Bear in mind, I hadn't seen him for months. There was no, this is just off, spot, on the spot stuff. And I gave him a suggestion, which was basically the first thing that Greg did would be the best piece of magic he's ever seen. And he would get up on his feet and he would whoop and cheer to show his appreciation. But after about 5 or 10 seconds, he'd realised that he was the only one doing it and sit down and feel embarrassed. And of course he did. Greg got to the end of his first thing, and this one person in this room of a good few hundred just jumped up and went nuts. Whoa! Greg knows me well enough, so he kind of scanned the room in stunned horror for a moment, and then he caught my eye and went, it's him. It's playing a fool again. Yeah, I mean, there are people I think that have that set of beliefs, and I think we meet them now and again. You'll meet somebody, and you'll know, even though they will say, "I've never had any experience with hypnosis." Right from the word go, everything is right. They are hanging on every word. The expectation is dripping off their tongue, and they are they are seeing intent where there is none as well. It reminds me of a great story of a friend of mine who travelled over to Miami a few years ago to see Richard Bandler do a big workshop.
That would be
Orlando, yeah. She'd
yeah, that's where he does his thing.
I knew it was Florida, so she'd paid a bloody
Yeah.
fortune to go over there. He'd been her hero for however many years, and she's got a front row seat for the Friday night welcome. And he walks out onto the stage. The crowd go nuts. Everybody's on their feet, and as he goes along, he catches her eye, nods, and she just feels herself collapse into hypnosis. And then he proceeds to do a 20-minute piece with her. And she phones me up going, oh my, this is incredible, and sort of basically saying, I hope I learn these techniques over the coming week, sort of mentality. And I said to her, but hang on a minute, have you not missed the ingredients in this? Because I don't for a second believe that he would have had the intent to do that. I think he was just nodding at a pretty girl in the front row, to be honest. But he's also a showman, so he knew what to do with it when it happened. Good on you, top marks for that. But she'd missed the whole thing about the expectations she had and the build up and the fact that she invested time and money, and she got to the front row and adrenaline, etc. Yeah, even down to the basic thing of she's just suddenly stood up with all that euphoria, and the blood has a habit of going south at that point. So you could arguably medically throw in a little bit of a fainting piece too. I mean, who cares whether it is or not? But
the thing, and also which you didn't mention, well, you did allude to it, but the prestige of the hypnotist. Before I understood hypnosis, I also was in Orlando at a Bandler class, and it was funny because there was a woman sitting in the front row. What year was your friend there?
Where are we now? So this is going to be a decade ago. It's going to be about a decade ago.
This is crazy. All right,
probably
this is crazy.
It was the same one.
About a decade ago, maybe 2004, maybe 2004 or 2003, but I'm not sure. And I'm sitting in the Bandler thing. I'm in the third row, and there's a woman in the front row. And Bandler walks in, and he says, he's talking about trance, and he says, and then you just go into a trance. And this woman went, and I went. Because then Bandler says, but it doesn't stop there because I can push it through her and into you. And I went, and I caught myself.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I wonder. That is so funny.
But I think what's also interesting about that is notice how the story slightly manipulates and changes. So if it was the same scenario, I'm recanting almost verbatim what she told me, because I don't know it. But isn't it interesting how her perception of it, if it is the same one, was altered from it happening to her phoning me probably 3 or 4 hours later? Yeah.
Right.
And just in her own mind, how this had changed from him just walking in, looking at her, and she'd erased all of that chit chat earlier. Yeah.
Oh, that would be incredible.
It would be the same thing. I think with all of it's important to understand that I'm not. I'm asking people to question stuff because I see a lot of evidence. Somebody's put the question here: what is the difference between hypnosis and daydream? And do you know what? We could argue all sorts of little parameters and bits and pieces, but I'm not sure if there is a massive difference in the sense of one of them is directed, one of them isn't, and also one of them is weirdly known to be a daydream. I think that's one of the things about daydreaming is you're daydreaming. It doesn't affect life outside of the daydream particularly, whereas hypnosis is much more focused and directed. I've looked at the clock and I've realised that we've rambled on for over an hour now anyway. Yeah. Right. So just bringing it sort of because I'm going to have to make a move. I'm sorry to.
I do too.
I made a comment about a parallel between the art forms, and the biggest parallel is in the word focus. Focus is what allows a magician to misdirect, and people think of misdirection of getting somebody to look away, but misdirection isn't that. In fact, if it is, it tends to be slightly bad. Real focus is about drawing in the mind as well, at which point when you have somebody's focus, it doesn't matter where their eyes are looking. There's a thing in magic where you basically have a card appear between your teeth, so they look up and the card is there, and it's amazing the amount of times that somebody would glance up with it in my mouth, glance back down, having not recognized this, and then when I ask them to look up and see it, now they get the the response. And I'm thinking, but you and I looked at each other. You were looking at the card and up to my eyes. It's impossible for you not to have seen it, unless their mind was focused sufficiently for them to have ignored the information because their focus is elsewhere. And I learned this when I started to look into magic. I continued that development into pickpocketing, and when sort of hypnosis, which was essentially the third pillar in some respects for me, when hypnosis came along, I started to realize that it was all about that sense of focus. And if I can get somebody to be, I know that Erickson and others looked at this, lots of people have looked at this idea of fixation, focus. Mm-hmm. But I think we should extend it further. We talk about eye fixation, and we talk about this idea of fixating the eyes on something and getting the eyes to fatigue, etc., and working off that. But I think it's much more about getting them to focus their attention. Now, one of the biggest difference between a good subject and a bad subject is whether they're there in the room with you a lot of the time. Now, so if you ask somebody to do something, are they doing that thing because their focus is on it, or is their focus on asking questions about the thing you're asking them to do? So you know that you get two people up on the stage and you say to both of them, stare at the light. Mm-hmm. And one of them, you can instantly just goes, and every part of their attention is on light. There is no internal dialogue. They're not thinking about other things. They're not even thinking about the question, the instruction you gave them. They are simply doing. And then you have the next person whose focus isn't on the thing that you've asked them. Their focus is on their mate Dave over there, and they're doing this with their eyes. They're going from the light to their friends, to the light to their friends, to you, to their friends, to the light, and so on and so forth. Or even if they are looking at the light, what's really going on in their head is this: what was he asking you to do? I wonder why he's going to do this. So should I be feeling anything? I don't know if I'm feeling anything. Maybe my eyes should be going.
Dialogue, yeah.
But that's the whole point is their focus isn't on the thing that you want to focus on. So what I learned through magic and the pickpocketing was to create the illusion for somebody, in the same way that as a magician, even with a simple card trick, I don't spell out the card trick for you. I give you opportunities. So if I've given you your playing card, but you think it's a different one, so you're already holding your card, but you already believe it's something else. I can either go, if I snap my fingers, it changes, and you then go, oh, it has, and you get a reaction. Or I can shift the focus, and I could say to you, how would you feel if that started to change while you were holding it? And now that forces you to start going through that process of imagining and feeling. Right. So that when the change happens, your brain then reorders the events and changes it, and you get given meaning for it too. And I think that if you start to shift that into when you're hypnotizing people, and I know you're really good at this actually, because I've seen you work, rather than going, right, I've got a collection of 3 inductions that I use, and I will try this one, and if that one doesn't work, I'll try this one, and if that one doesn't work, I'll try this one. It would be a lot more fluid than that, and look at it from the point of view of, how can I shift your focus? What things can I say and do, and how can I say and do them? How can I use my physiology, my tonality, my posture, the interaction between the two of us? Because some people need to feel that they're in control. So I'm going to be a little bit more submissive and a little bit softer as I approach you. I'm going to avoid eye contact when I don't need it, and I'm not going to try and be overpowering, and I'm not going to try and be the hypnotist. Look in my eyes, because actually that might not work for you at all. Yeah. Equally, if I meet somebody else, and I determine that I can focus their attention in a different way, I will. And sometimes that will be via very classical looking showboaty inductions, and even down to, it's still one of my favorite inductions of all time, mainly because I'm inherently lazy when it comes to things like this, is just to simply say to somebody, could you imagine what it would be like to be hypnotized? Yeah. Close your eyes and just imagine that now. In fact, keep imagining it until it happens to you, which it will. And then I ignore them. And as long as there is some semblance to framework there, it's going to work. You understand what I mean? I think we can get out and play. I do. So,
obviously there are a lot of people that would work for beautifully. Hey, James, since we're coming to the end, I want you to take just a moment and talk about where people can find you and what you're doing now, as far as classes and whatnot.
Pitch. All right,
that's right. Plug. Yes.
For those of you who would like to know a little bit more about this, my friend and I down in LA have created a company called Power Academy Limited, and you can find us at www.power.academy. In fact, I shall write it down here so that you can see powa.academy. There we are. So we've got Power.academy, and it's a training resource. It's an online interactive academy training resource. We've got two key products, one of them which is the Secrets of Pickpocketing, which is a full course on that. And we've also got another one called Reality Bending, which is again a full course on mine and Danny's take on hypnosis. And as I've said again, we're not about saying to you, hey, here's a new method, here's a new way, do this instead of what you've done before. What we're saying is, here's a new way of thinking about it. Here's a much more simplistic, much more direct way of thinking, and the success we've had has been astonishing. People have really loved it. We offer a 7-day money-back guarantee on the product, which basically means you can buy it, $147. You can buy the courses. You can keep them for a week. You could watch them 5 or 6 times if you really wanted to, and you could learn everything that we have to teach you, and then you can get your money back. But what you miss out on if you were to do such a sly thing, and by the way, nobody has. That's what's lovely about this. We've had a couple of refunds because somebody looked at the course and went, I can't afford it, or it's not really for me. And we went, that's fine, have your money back. That's why we've done this. But we update the courses, we add more to them. So people, it's interactive on each video. You can add questions and everybody else can see the question and the answer. It's a very cool platform for streaming information. And people have asked us, and we've answered. We've added, when we first released it, so the pickpocketing one started off at 4.5 hours, and it was complete. And a few people said, I'd like to see a bit more of this, or a little bit more of that, or could you cover this? So we added another hour and a half for them. And it's free. It doesn't cost them any more, and they get all the answers and etc. So isn't that illegal to teach people to pickpocket?
I just saw that.
Yeah. Evan, that's a good point. Well made. Yeah, I don't know whether there's a serious note to that question. Honestly, if you bought this and you learned it all, you'd be really good at a theatrical pickpocket show, and you could have a huge amount of fun and add it to your repertoire. If you took this and went out on the streets and tried to steal things, you'd get caught, because actually there are some fundamental differences between thievery
unless
and
you're a Bob.
Unless
you're a Bob.
But it's about pickpocketing in general. It's about performance pickpocketing, but we're not specifically teaching a stage structure. We're giving you the ingredients for you to then build upon from a solid foundation is the idea. So with the reality bending course, it's our take on hypnosis, same principle. It's going to be added to. The more people join in and comment, the bigger the whole thing grows. And it's a lot of fun. And we've had seriously good, positive stuff. What else am I doing? I'm teaching, I'm traveling, I'm performing. This is what I love what I do. It's great fun.
Well, as somebody who has taken your pickpocketing course, I can say that it was extremely entertaining. I had a blast. I had such a good time, and oh,
by the way, just
you do amazing.
Thank you. By the way, just as I like to do, and I always end and caveat absolutely every talk, seminar, lecture I give. I don't just teach performance, I teach outside in the business community as well. But I always caveat everything I say with this. What you've heard me say is my belief and my opinion. That's all, nothing more. I would hope that you could listen to it, you could learn from it, and you could add to what you do. But I'm not dogmatic in any way. And if you've got something that challenges what I've said, and if you want to present it to me with evidence, with proof, then I would drop what I currently think in a heartbeat. Because to me, the important thing here is that we get to truth and not to opinion or dogma. Because do you know what? I could be wrong, and I'm the first to admit that.
Right. All right, James. Thanks very much and say hello to Charlie for me.
I shall indeed.
Take care.
Thank you very much indeed.
Bye-bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.